Hi there. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nat. I am a developer in the JADE plant. I've been working there for about 3.5 years. So today I'm going to talk to you about some new interfaces we've introduced in the root schema and some language enhancements we've made to the foreach statement in JADE 2020. So in this section, I'll be covering off 4 JADEs that we've completed, these being the new root schema iterable interfaces, enhancements to the foreach statement to support the new interfaces, new foreach as clause, which I'll explain a bit later in more detail, and I'll also be covering off some improvements we've made to the interface implementers dialog. So the first interface we've added is the JADE Iterable interface, and this basically provides a contract for an implementing class to be iterable. So any class that implements this interface can be used as an iterable expression in a foreach statement. It's basically an abstraction of the current root schema collection class, but it allows for non-collection classes to be iterable. And the collection class implements this interface by default. So this goes hand in hand with the JADE iterator interface, which is exposed through the create iterator method on the iterable interface. So this interface provides a contract for an implementing class to sequentially generate or access elements one at a time. And this is also implemented by the root schema iterator class. So we've also provided a reverse iterable interface, and this extends the iterable interface, and it provides a contract for an implementing class to be reverse iterable. That is to produce an iterator that supports both forward and backward iteration. So this leads on to the reversible iterator, which is exposed through the reverse iterable interface. And so this provides a contract for the implementing class to generate or access elements in the opposite direction to the next method on the iterator interface. And again, these are implemented by collection and iterator by default. So in addition to the new iterable interfaces, we've also extended the foreach statement grammar to support these new interfaces. So essentially, this means that in addition to accepting any collection reference, it will now also accept a JADE iterable interface reference or any implementer. And by extension, we'll also accept the JADE reverse iterable reference or implementing class. So we've added these new interfaces and we now support them in the foreach statement, but what's the point? Well, the main reasons are it will allow you to create virtual collections that have the same behavior as a real collection, can be used in place of a real collection, but don't actually need to be backed by one. So this will in turn allow you to create more generic code that can handle both real and virtual collections and iterate either. So there are some limitations to this new iterable expression. So the foreach reversed option can only be used if the iterable expression represents something that can actually be iterated in the back direction. That is anything that implements the JADE reverse iterable interface, which includes any collections currently. So typically the foreach statement will hold a shared lock over the collection for the duration of the iteration. But since the foreach may not actually be iterating a collection now, we'll only take out the shared lock if the iterable object is a collection instance. Similarly, the discrete option, the behavior of this will only occur if the iterable object is a collection instance. So in JADE 2020, we've also extended the foreach statement grammar to include a new as clause type expression. So this is an optional expression that can be used to relax and compile time checking of the foreach statement's target variable. So here is an example of an explicit type name being used to allow the target variable of type animal while iterating over a generic collection reference. So normally this method wouldn't compile without the as clause because it would only allow a variable of type any to be used because it is a generic collection reference. So as I said, it's an optional expression that basically just relaxes compile time restrictions. And this can also be used, or it can be used in situations where the collection is known to contain only a subtype of the membership, or it's an iterable interface reference. So this has been introduced in a way that allows the expression to be either an explicit type name or an expression that results in a type, excluding pseudotype. So if an explicit type name as clause is used, there's some additional compile time checks that take place. So the compiler will validate that the explicit type is a subtype of the iterable membership type and will raise an exception if it's not. And also the compiler will also validate that the target variable is the same type or a supertype of the as clause type. And again, raise an exception if it's not. So in addition to allowing an explicit type name, we also allow the expression to be, well, it can be any expression that results in a type, that being a class, interface, or a prim type. Since the actual type cannot be determined at compile time in this case, the checks outlined on the previous slide will occur at runtime instead. So this validation that occurs at runtime is kind of split into two categories: checks that occur once before beginning the for each iteration, and checks that occur every iteration. So before the for each iteration is started, the as clause type is validated against the iterable object's membership type. If the types are not compatible, we'll raise an exception. But one thing here is if this exception is resumed, the for each statement is skipped completely and execution will begin on the next statement after the for each. And so also at the beginning of each iteration, the retrieved values type is validated against the as clause type. And if the type retrieved is not the same or a subtype of the as clause, an exception is raised. But if this exception is resumed, the for each statement will move on to the next iteration. In saying that, so the body of the for each will be skipped and will retrieve the next object. And there are some optimizations here depending on the membership type of the collection. We don't always need to perform all these checks depending on what we're actually iterating. So I'll just briefly cover off some improvements we've made to the interface implementers dialog. So the first thing is that we've added a list box to allow you to change the currently selected class of that and to close and reopen the dialog. So if you're implementing an interface on multiple classes, you can do it all in one go now. We've also separated the already implemented and available interfaces. Previously, there was a single drop-down list box which you had to basically click an interface to see if it was implemented or not. And so there's also a show all and a show inherited checkbox here now, which will show super schema interfaces and any interfaces that are implemented on superclasses of the currently selected class. So in the information box, we've also added a super interfaces section, which will show if the currently selected interface has any super interfaces and it will show if they've been implemented or not. Yeah, okay, cool. I'll now just switch over and I'll run through a quick demo that shows off these features in action. So if I can get it to come up. Cool. So in this schema, I basically have a customer class with some basic properties. We've got first name, last name, phone number. I've got a create method, which sets those guys up. A display method, which just returns those details as a string in a formatted way. I've also got a type method, which takes a string and retrieves the various tokens from it and sets up a customer instance and returns it. So along with that, I've also got a customer dictionary and a method to create and populate one. And you'll see here that this, well, through being a a collection subclass, it will automatically implement the JADE iterable interface. And similarly, we've also got a customer array. But the cool class here is I have this one customer file reader, which implements the JADE iterable interface. So he has a method which will create a customer iterator. And basically what this customer iterator does is it's set up using a file, and the next will go through, read the file, create a customer, and return it. So what this allows us to do, I'll show you shortly, but we have these two methods, iterate customers, which takes a JADE iterable interface reference. And you can see I'm using the as clause here to allow it to be a customer target variable. And I'm basically just iterating over these and calling the display method. And I also have the same example, but using a generic collection reference rather than the JADE iterable. So with our customer dictionary and customer array, we can basically create an instance of it, and I can pass it through to both of these methods, the one that accepts a JADE iterable and the one that accepts a collection parameter, and we'll happily be able to iterate these collections in both cases. So if I run this, we should get some nice output. Yep. And the same goes for the customer array. Great. So now we come to the customer file reader. So obviously, because it's not a collection, it can't be passed to the method that's accepting a collection, but we can pass it through to the method that is taking a JADE iterable interface. So I'm going to debug this one so we can just have a quick look what's going on. So if I create my file, I create my customer file reader. If I step into this, we'll see that we're positioned at the start of the foreach statement. And if I step in again, we should see that, so the create iterator method on the customer file reader is called. So we create our iterator, we return that. And then next is, we're inside the next method of this implementation. So we'll go away, we'll parse the file, create our customer, and return it. So if I let this run now, we should see that the file's read and all of our customers within the file are output. Cool. So that's a brief demo that just goes over how these, how the for each statement enhancement work. So just to recap, I've shown you these new iterable interfaces, enhancements to the for each statement to support them, the new for each as clause, and I've also covered off the improvements we've made to the interface implementers dialog. Cool. Thanks for watching.